Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazzard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Binge Factor. I'm Tracy Hazzard, and I've got an interesting mix of both podcast and TV broadcaster today, Megan Fenyoe. Megan and I met at a City Summit event, and her power, just her little packed power. She's tiny like I am, and she's just packed with energy, packed with a force, and packed with some big passion for her show. Her show is I Am Enough TV, which is distributed on Roku, Apple, Amazon Fire, that kind of thing, the streaming TV model. She's done a few episodes of those. She's done about half a dozen, maybe 10 by now. She has a podcast called The Blonde Bombshell, which she has a co-host for. She's got 75 episodes or more there right now. Megan is just driven to share, to grow, to inspire people. She's got a movement called the I Am Enough movement. And I think it's really important for you to take a listen to some of her advice, because she's talking about really how you build that momentum for a movement, how you build that momentum to grow. And she has a nonprofit on top of it all. So Megan Fenyoe is an Air Force veteran, licensed clinical mental health therapist. She's a speaker and trainer, host of the Blonde Bombshell podcast and I Am Enough TV, and founder of the international I Am Enough movement, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. She's the Amazon bestselling author and recently published her book, You Are Enough, 5 Steps to Move from Struggle to Strength. And she's been featured on SiriusXM, including the Jenny McCarthy Show, and over 300 TV, radio shows and podcasts as a guest. She's got quite an experience there for you guys to listen to. Megan has gone through many struggles through her life, and she's going to talk about them today. I think they're what drive her. They're definitely what make an impact into how she has her binge factor for the show, and we're going to talk about that too. She is working as a mental health therapist for the past 15 years. Still today, she takes clients, and she's an expert in her field. Her area of expertise is the mind and way it affects behavior and well-being. And that comes across in her approach to the show too. I am so excited to bring you Megan. She just has such passion and purpose. She helps people build confidence. She helps them find clarity. She helps them get inspired. She helps them take action towards their dreams. And I hope that she inspires you to take more action with your show, grow your show, bring in some of those great success tips she's going to share with you today. So I'm so excited to bring to you podcaster and TV host, Megan Fenyoe. Megan, so glad to see you.
Hey, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. I Am Enough TV, the Blonde Bombshell, which I love. You're busy. You got a lot going on. You got TV and video streaming, and you've got podcasting going on. What made you decide that was the media types for you?
Well, that's a really good question, because I kind of just jumped into the Blonde Bombshell podcast. That launched a year and a half ago, and it was just really something that I ended up doing with a friend of mine. And just because we're both mental health therapists, and we wanted to provide more info and just empowerment to women. And so we just kind of jumped into that. We had no clue what we were doing, let me tell you. And it was like the most funniest, like the first couple episodes were hilarious. But I love to talk, and I love being interviewed on shows. I've been on over 300 TV podcasts in the last 2 years. But I also love to inspire people through other people's stories. And so the podcast just made sense. And then I Am Enough TV, that was a whole nother thing that just started, about 2 months ago. So that's been a whole nother interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, I love being on camera, and I love empowering people, and really when I have my guests, really sharing their businesses and what they're doing too. It's just a way to give back.
I love that. I love that. And, this is the thing is that you've got a tremendous amount of energy to what you do, and to not have a media that allows you to be out there exposing how fun you are, how interesting you are, how much, how engaged you are. That would be a shame, right?
That's true. And it's funny that you say that, because I should probably be more on camera per se, like Facebook Lives and that kind of stuff than I am, because I do have a lot of energy. But by the time like I'm done with all my shows and like everything and seeing patients, I don't have time. I don't have the energy to do like Facebook Lives. But I think people can see my energy, like even on the podcast, even though it's not video. I think that they can tell my energy and my love for life and for what I do, just by the way that I treat other people, hopefully. So.
I think it comes across. You're absolutely right. That is one of your many binge factors, but it is that activation that you provide, and it comes through in audio, not just in video. So yay,
Yay.
Good for you. But you've got great stories about how you work with people, how you've helped yourself through things. How do you keep that sort of storytelling module within the structure of a show? Like, how do you keep that going so it doesn't sound like we're sitting in on a therapy lesson,
Exactly.
a therapy session? It sounds like stories.
Well, to be honest, I struggle with that, and I actually struggled with it more. I'm learning, more now, but I love sharing my story because it's empowering, and it just makes me feel like a badass when I get to share it. And so I do find like when I have guests that I do struggle with like not making it about me. And even as a therapist, I'm a mental health therapist, I struggle with that sometimes as well. But I'm human, and it is what it is. But it's providing like these little tips and these little tricks and like these kind of like comeback moments. So like, oh wait, here, I'm intrigued by that. I'm not going to tell you everything, but because if you listen to my podcast, I don't just share my entire story on one podcast. So it's definitely about creating the synergy and the right times and the right moments to kind of be able to drop different things about your story.
I think that's such a good point that you're bringing out, that human nature is, I need you to know all about me, but that's not actually the best way to do that over time on a show. It's like, give them little bits and pieces of you over time, and actually they begin to love you even more, so they come back for more.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of people will like Google me or something like that, and they'll hear my whole story. But it's, when I do podcast interviews, it's about my guests. It's not about me. And if I can provide just a little bit of snippet into how I was able to move through something that my guest was talking about, then obviously I want to put that in there, because I never want to be the type of person that acts like she has it all together, because majority of the time I'm a hot mess, and I want that authenticity and realism to be shown. And so that's sometimes I find myself like sharing stories because I want people to know that I'm a mess half the time. Like, I don't have it all together.
Okay. So behind the scenes here, we messaged back and forth all morning going like, are we gonna put this on video? Do we have to like put our makeup on? Like, so yeah, we all get that, Megan.
Yes, exactly. Because, we are stuck in our homes right now. So I was like, do I have to put some makeup on? So I just put a little bit on. I at least took a shower today for you. So
I appreciate that. I did too. So, there you go. But, now everyone's going, what's her story, Tracy? Ask her the question. And so I'm going to dive a little bit into that, which I don't normally do here, but I really do, because I think it's an impetus for understanding your binge factor. So why and what happened to you that really shifted your entire life and model of business?
Ooh, well, so I've been a mental health therapist for 15 years. When I was 33 years old, I commissioned as an officer in the Air Force and moved from Michigan to California. And I was not looking for a husband at that time. And lo and behold, I found one. And it was a very quick marriage or relationship, and we got married. And we were married for 2.5 years. Out of the 2.5 years, he had an affair for 14 months of the 2.5-year marriage. And I found myself in a very narcissistic, abusive relationship. Even as a mental health therapist, I did not realize that.
Because you were in the midst of it.
I was in the midst of it, and I lost every sense of who I was. I literally did not feel like I was good enough. He made me feel like I was crazy. I was insane, that I was the one that was causing all of these things to happen. You know, he kicked me out of our house twice. He filed for divorce 4 times and pulled the papers in 2 years. And he finally went through with the divorce in 2016. And I was so just, again, I ignored all of the warning signs. I acted like I had it all together. You know, I was still seeing patients, but I was literally dying inside. And so when the divorce happened, I was so still traumatized that I stayed faithful and committed to him for 2 years after the divorce was final. And we dated, and, you know, he just said all of these things. And like, I believed that it was going to work out. And then the last big incident happened on February 13th of 2018. 4 months prior to that, I had lost my 6-figure income at a hospital as a therapist. And then 4 months later is when the last incident happened with him. And I had nothing left to do but to say enough is enough. And because I was literally, I had nothing. I had lost everything. I was 38 years old, literally had lost my 6-figure income, and was just like, okay, I have to be done. And so that was February 15th. That was of 2018. That was the last time I had any contact with him. And then I was like, okay, now what? Like, what am I going to do? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I jumped into my own therapy, got a therapist, and started doing the difficult trauma work. And then I also started writing. Never thought I was going to be an author. I literally thought my life was going to be in the 4 walls of a hospital. You know, I had a network marketing business, but really just thought that I was going to be a 9-to-5er and do therapy in a hospital.
Well, you know, this is so poignant that we're recording this right now and you're talking about this, because I think that that's what a lot of people are struggling with right now as we're going through sort of quarantine issues here in California, especially, and around the world, is that we had this idea of what our life was going to be like, what our jobs might be like, what our businesses would be like, and it all gets ended. And it's not so much the fear of catching this or catching a cold and dying. Like, you know, these are not quite the things that we're really deeply afraid of. What we're deeply afraid of is that, and deeply, I'm going to say, grieving that our life is not exactly what we thought it was going to be.
Exactly. I'm so glad that you said that, because that's exactly what people are dealing with. It's not the fear that they're going to get sick. It's the fear of, oh my gosh, what is my life going to look like now? And that's exactly how I felt 2 years ago. I was like, what am I going to do? I could have gone back and gotten a full-time job at a hospital, but I knew that God had put like this story in my life for a reason, and I had to do something with it. So I opened a private mental health practice. I also had to file for bankruptcy. So literally had no money.
You did it like all in a short period of time.
In 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
You took all that beating in a short period of time.
Sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, you did this all in 2 years. And I did, and I don't know how I did it, but it's by the grace of God and like the support I've had and me just doing this hard work. Like, I literally dove into therapy. I dove in to figuring out who I was and closing that person I was when I was with him. I mean, it was 6 years of my life. And so I wrote a best-selling book. I wrote it during the most traumatic 5 months of my life. That book is my saving grace. I talk about these 5 steps that move from your struggle into your strength. And those were the 5 steps that I was working on while I was writing the book. And then started my private mental health practice. And then a year ago, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, launched the I Am Enough movement, International I Am Enough movement, and then the podcast, and then I Am Enough TV. And now the movement is a nonprofit. So yes, everything in 2 years. Am I still making like 6 figures? Heck no, I'm not. But what I love is that I'm doing something every single day I get up, and I'm doing something that I love.
Well,
And
and this is
yeah.
this is why I wanted you to hear Megan's story, and I wanted you to hear what's going on, because now when you listen to the show, you're going to hear the bin factor. You're going to see what's going on in her show. And I'm going to say that you're probably going to get this more on I Am Enough TV, because that's all her, right? Once you have the dynamic of a co-host, there's a mix of things that are going on, totally different. But she's got, You Are Enough is her book. I happen to have the bookmark. You Are Enough is her book. So we'll have the links to that in the blog post for this episode, so you'll be able to find that. It's a great book, and it's got steps and tools, but she's not teaching on her show.
Mm-mm.
No, she's letting stories flow through. She's letting inspiration happen. She's letting us identify. And what Megan does so well, and this is her bingeability factor, is she listens and she lets the stories flow, whether they're coming from her or they're coming from her guest. And that is a skill. You may not have realized you've been developing that, Megan, but you have. That when you're able to do that active listening and empathetic relationships with what's going on with your guest, first off, you build a great rapport with your guest, which is really important. And I'm sure that you do that with your patients too. It's very obvious you have a really great style of working with people. And that comes across as to being, as a listener, I feel that you hear me even though we're not talking.
That is so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's my psychoanalysis about.
I love it. I think it's great because, especially, if you have your listeners and audience that are podcasters and things like that, one of my biggest pet peeves, and again, nothing on anyone's show I've been on or anything, is people that ask for questions or have this like rundown of how the show's going to go. And I have people for the Blonde Bombshell podcast that will message me and will ask for the questions. And I'm like, I'm not trying to cause like any anxiety, but on both of my shows, I want it to be completely authentic and real. I do ask 2 questions at the beginning and at the end, but I never want to come in with an agenda. And it's like, either as a host, if for your listeners and audience, like as a host, do your homework so that like what questions to ask if there's some dead whatever.
Space
silence.
time, yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. But I hate going in with people that have an agenda, because that doesn't make real talk radio, real
Then we go
podcast.
into sound bites instead of into stories and inspiration. And that's not your show style, right? So I think that's so true. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's one of the things that I think is a resonating pattern between the successful podcasters. And while many of them are very prepared, they don't do prescribed questions. Exactly. And I think that that's a strategy for success. I hear it again and again. It's certainly something that I advise all my clients not to write down their questions and not to give them to anyone, right? Even if you do that, but because it creates this sense of preparedness and it comes through inauthentic. You're absolutely right about that. Mm-hmm. So, so you dove into this without a lot of understanding of what you're getting into. So I think that's a lot of people are really scared to do that. They're like, oh, let me just listen to 100 different podcasts. I'll watch a bunch of videos. And they're just like, how do I do this? Keeps them in that fear factor that doesn't move them forward. But you said, forget that. I'm just going to dive in.
I just did it. I honestly did it. I had never listened to one podcast. Well, I lied. When all of this started, I went to a thing called New Media Summit with Steve Olsher. And it was like a free event. I can't remember. I think maybe I didn't pay for it. Anyway, so I didn't even know what podcasting was. All I knew was that like, if I went, I could like get interviewed to be on podcasts. I literally had never listened to a podcast before. And this was literally 2 years ago. I had never listened to a podcast in my entire life. And I went and I was like, oh, this is fun. And I started being interviewed on podcasts. And then when I talked to one of my friends, we were working at the same place as a therapist. And I'm like, we should really do this. Like, we should like just start talking. Like, I'm sure we've got some good things to say. And, and yeah, lo and behold, that's what we created. But we did it we had to hire someone after the first couple episodes because we're like, all we need is Zoom, and like we can share a microphone. Like we had like shared earbuds together and like no like actual microphone. It like it was a disaster. And so the first couple episodes are really funny, but then we had to hire someone to do like the intro and the music and like all of that stuff. But it was a fun learning
You
process.
dove in and learned on the go. What
Yep.
do you think was the hardest thing for you guys to, to sort of develop and skill to bring into the show?
Well, I have to give my co-host props because she does all the editing.
Wow.
And we don't do a lot of editing because we really want it to be authentic. And one of our taglines is unapologetically owning who you are. So we don't care if there's like some missed word, things like that. But obviously has to be some editing done. So I don't have any idea about editing whatsoever. Thank goodness.
That's okay. Get a partner, right?
Yeah. But the one thing that we've been doing this for a little over a year and a half. And again, it's really, I think the biggest lesson is remaining true to who you are and to not be afraid to ask for things that are needed, even from your co-host, but also from your guests, and for your guests to ask that as well. One of the things that we did not do, which I cannot believe it, but I think with all of the other mail lists and everything else I have going on, we never captured anything about our audience. So we are now, just starting to get into the sponsorship piece. Because before that, I wasn't interested in doing sponsors. And so for the last year, we haven't captured any, the only data that we have is like our listeners and what countries and stuff they're from. So I think
there's no data. I think that's a mistake for those of you who don't have a show yet out there who are listening to this. You think there's a lot of information about your subscribers and your listeners, but that belongs to iTunes and Spotify and those places out there, and they don't share it with you. So you don't know that correlation between a subscriber and what they look like from a demographic or a psychographic situation.
Exactly.
So you don't have that unless you bring them back to your website, capture them, and start to find out more about them, right?
Yes. So that's exactly what, and it's funny that we're on this call right now because we just had a call with my virtual assistant last week to start our website. So that's exactly what we're doing is, and because we have everything on Libsyn, and we can see like how many, people downloaded a certain episode in whatever country or whatever. But yeah, no demographics. And we have like a Facebook group. But yeah, so now if you're just starting podcasting, get a website because for the last year we haven't had that. And so now we have a website that captures people's emails, and that's what we are going to be using on the show for promotions for people to go back and listen to the episodes and everything.
Right. Well, and for those of you out there who haven't been listening to a bunch of my shows already, most people will find over time that 60% of their listenership comes off platform, meaning off of Google to your website. So somewhere else besides iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any of those other podcast players. So you'll actually see a boost in your listenership because you now have this new way for people to find you, because there are a lot of people out there who want what you have, but they're not podcast listeners. So that brings me to my next kind of question for you. Megan, what made you decide that the streaming TV was the next step for you?
Oh, I love this question. Because I had been asked so many times over the last 2 years to do a TV show. And just financially, it just never worked. And I was like, I got the podcast, it's cool. But as time went on, I have heard and I have seen that people are getting away from not podcasts, not podcasts at all, but from like internet, like TV, like let's stream something on Facebook or this and that. And then Facebook is doing a lot of crazy stuff with videos and like stuff that you post and TV shows and all of that stuff. So I actually had an amazing opportunity to join this awesome network. And I have a show and I literally do it. I never thought it was possible. I always thought I had to do it on a studio, but I literally do it in my living room. I have a backdrop. I do it on Zoom. It's 22-minute interviews, and it airs every Monday morning on the website. And then it also is available on an app, and then also on Roku and Amazon Fire TV and all of that stuff. And it's crazy, especially right now. I have found that more people, because, we're all in this quarantine phase, a lot of people have reached out to me and been like, oh my gosh, I saw your show on Roku.
Because they're desperate for content. So they're out there really searching. And so this was another really interesting statistic. So in the sort of overall media industry, we have Edison Research does some research every year, and theirs just came out a week ago. And the interesting statistic that I heard that just shocked me was that there is about 70%, which is really high, of people finding your show not from using the search engines on Apple or on Stitcher or on Spotify, but by searching other places to find your show, like just general Google searches, searching on streaming TV, like all of these places. So they're looking for new content in alternative places than you think. And so being there is really critically important.
It is. And I think too right now, because I think a lot of people are trying to stay off social media a little bit more because of all the craziness in the world right now. So more people are going to like Netflix and Hulu and like Roku and all of that stuff. And so it was so funny yesterday morning. I go to my roommate. I was like, hey, I need to check Roku and see, I just want to make sure like everything sounds good. Because again, I am the girl that does not listen to my episodes. I don't, like, my brother puts my intro and my outro on with the TV show. I've never listened to one of my podcast episodes because I trust that if it's out, like it is what it is, right? Like I don't want to be judgmental.
You're not alone. I think that's everybody listen to that. You're not alone, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that perfectionist model of us like wanting to do it loses the element of energy of what it was when I put it out there.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean,
went on
fix
Roku.
Something if you know it's bad, but if it's not, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And so I went on Roku yesterday morning, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks really good, but my face looks so big on my TV. Because it was like the first time I had actually really seen the interview like on TV in my living room.
Oh yeah, that's right. So, yes, you definitely should go check that out the first time you.
There's been 8 episodes already, and it's the first time I've ever checked it out. So far so good. But I was like, I'm sitting here. I might as well, check out Roku and make sure everything sounds good. 8 weeks later, but I did. So far so good.
Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, no problem at all. But it's called I Am Enough TV, just so you guys are out there and you're searching on your Roku and other places that you'll be able to find it there on Amazon Fire. It's on Apple as well, I believe.
Yep, it's on Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Voice America, iHeartRadio. It's on Google Play, all of those big things. And we also have an app as well. So you can download it on an app.
Awesome. So there's lots of places to find it. Okay. Yeah. So let's dive into some of the tips that you can give out because you've been doing this, and please feel free to answer either the TV version or the podcast version, because I think both would help. So the 5 things that people are most looking for help with are the best ways to book great guests. So what do you do?
What do I do to get guests?
Get great guests. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I have a lot of people that send me guests. So I'm the only one that books guests. This between us, me and your million of listeners. I'm the only one that books guests for our podcast. My co-host is just getting out there and all of that. So she doesn't have like a lot of the connections, but a lot of my guests come from other people that have been on my show and, networks that I have made. So definitely that's the number one. But then a lot of people will reach out to me because like I'll post my episode on social media and they'll be like, oh, you're a podcast host. And so then I'll have to like have a conversation with them. But yes. Can I do a disclaimer real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you reach out to a podcast host to be on a show, make sure you know what their show is about. I get
please.
People on LinkedIn reaching out about the Blonde Bombshell podcast, and most of them are guys. And I'm like, if you listen to the show, you know that we only interview women on the podcast. Now,
but they don't have to be all blondes.
You don't have to be blonde. No. But it's funny because obviously, like, I'm not going to like entertain that. Like, if you couldn't take 2 seconds to like literally listen to a couple of our episodes. I'm a TV, I do take guys, but like for the podcast. So it's really funny when people reach out to me because if it's a guy, they're like, can I be on your podcast? No,
Well, and you also have to be careful because a lot of bots are all reaching out. So they have they just reaching out because it says podcast host in your title, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So yes, please. That is great advice for everyone out there to take heed. Please.
Yes.
Please. I know I'm so tired of it myself. So everybody is. So great guests, truly tapping into your network and growing that on a consistent basis, and be willing to take solicitations. Be willing to be open to that.
Exactly.
And so, okay, what about increasing listeners? We think this is the hardest thing for almost the most successful podcasters still say, I'm struggling with this. What do you got?
So I'm going to be completely honest. I don't pay attention to the numbers. I'm probably the weirdest host ever because I don't.
I'm glad you don't. I think that's good for some people.
I think the word, when you were asking that question, the word that was coming into my mind was consistency. You have to show up. You know, my co-host is a stickler on like making sure that our episode is released on the same day every week, you know, because that's what our listeners want, which I agree with, you know, so the consistency. So being present on social media, having your episodes come out on the same day, not necessarily the same time, but like the same day, and being active. Like, so we have like a Blonde Bombshell Facebook group, you know, and being active like in that group, right? Not just like posting like the interviews, but like engaging in that group or in your business page. You know, I think that those are like the main things.
Great. Well, you know, it is a struggle for everyone to try to get new listeners, but I like the model that you say, that it's not important. It's important that I'm putting it out there. I'm being consistent about it, because in the end that will serve you the best. So I do see that again and again. So, so the next part of it is like, after you've increased your listeners and gotten great guests and you're working through that, you still got to keep producing it in a professional way. And I know you're not doing the production side of it, but what do you think is that key element to good level production on your side from what you do as the host?
Well, I think, you know, we just actually had a strategy meeting. So it's been, we actually were late. We should have had it a long time ago. But I think with everything going around in the world, it kind of just stopped us in our tracks. And so we're like, let's revamp it. So we're revamping the podcast right now. We are revamping the way, you know, like our mics and like all of that stuff. We don't do video, but we're revamping that. We are revamping our social media, obviously starting a website, also wanting to be more out in the community. We live in San Diego and we have a ton of San Diego listeners. And so once this is all done, we really want to get out more and engage people. Like, one of the questions we ask is like, what does it mean for you to be a bombshell? And for the TV show, if you watch the TV show, I've gone around San Diego and literally asked random strangers what it means for them to be enough. And so we want to do that with the podcast, right? Like randomly walking around and asking people. So engaging people more that way. So I think production side is kind of all of those things in one.
So
right?
having a strategy, having a plan, and not being afraid to pivot it and revamp it.
And revamp it. Because sometimes we're even like revamping the ending, you know, because sometimes it gets a little old, you know, and you want to like spice it up or whatever. So I think production wise is keeping it fresh and just don't fall into the mediocre. So if you find yourself with the complacency part where like, oh, it's another podcast today, or I got to do, you know, this or that, that means you have to like revamp something in your production to make it more exciting for you and for your listeners.
So I'm curious, because this is the hot topic around our office this morning, actually. So we have a lot of clients who are rebranding right now. I just rebranded to the Binge Factor from Center of Influence, is what it was last year, right? So I did that earlier this year, because every year I revamp and rebrand myself. So we're always doing stuff like that. But are you going to go back and redo the intros and the graphics or anything like that on your old episodes? Are you going to start from where you are and move forward?
Oh, heck no. We're going to start from where we're at.
I'm so glad you said that, because
no way. I don't have time for that. Because it shows your growth, right? And it shows, I honestly think that it shows your audience your commitment to your show when you want to rebrand and you keep it in the past how it was and go forward, because it's showing your audience that you're still excited about this and that this is how far you've come. So no, I would never change it. Heck no.
Heck no. Well, you know what? The only change that I did go back and change the episode art, because we have 2 podcasts on one site, and I wanted people to be clear which ones were Binge Factor shows and which ones weren't. But that's about the only change that I was like, I'm going to go back and do that, because otherwise people are confused. Yeah. But I didn't change the intro outros. I agree with you. I think that's I think showing growth. I love that model of thinking about it. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, now we talked about this just briefly a little bit, that you wanted to go out in the field and do things, but what other things do you do today that encourages engagement in your community?
Oh my gosh. I need to do more, but social media, I'm just going to be honest. I hate social media. I wish that social media did not live, only because I feel like it just takes way too much time. And I would rather be out and about and meeting people. So I think for me, I'm present, I'm present on social media. I'm doing it.
Talk to everybody about your cards. And I wished I had grabbed mine and I forgot it. Yeah, that's it. I am enough.
It's really wrinkled.
But you do that as a part of and I think that does drive engagement, Megan.
Oh my gosh, it does. I mean, I've been very blessed, to be honest, because one of my weaknesses is social media. I'm not on it as much as I should be. But for some reason, I've been able to grow this movement in the last year. We've reached 17 countries and 47 states. And I didn't even know that I was branding myself when this came out. Because again, I didn't know what it meant to be an entrepreneur or a business person 2 years ago. And I just created these cards, and then it just kind of came. That's kind of how the branding happened. But so these cards, they're free. They're visual coping cards. And it's for the I'm Enough movement, which is my 501c3. And like on the back, it has the word because, and then there's 3 lines, and you write why you believe that you're enough. And you carry these around. So anytime you have those negative thoughts creeping in your head, you like pull it out and you repeat what you wrote on it. So you can get 5 of them for free from the website. So I think for that, now with the Bombshell, I've got 4 websites. And I've got 10 media pages. And again, it's about delegating what you can do. But it's always me on my personal page. It's always me on pretty much anything on Facebook, Instagram. I'm not a huge fan of Instagram, but I have it. But I think it's making sure your message is always the same, right? But also showing the fun side of you. So it's like my business page or my Facebook page is not all just business. It's, like I'm out here doing this or doing that. But these cards really keep me engaged, because literally I give them out to anyone and everyone out in
And
public.
Do they send them back to you? Do they like send you videos back, take selfies?
So yes. So if you go to our Instagram page, it's enough_movement_. You can see selfies of people from all over the world. A lot of them I have taken. We never got your selfie, did we?
I didn't. We never end up having time, but I will make it happen. Yes. I will do it. Yeah.
Yes. So people will send me selfies, or I will take selfies of people. So you can see those on the Instagram page from all over the world. It's pretty awesome. So once you have your brand, you've got to live your brand. And I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't believe in that because I never thought I'd have a brand. But literally, I breathe this, because it's a reminder for me that I am enough, because I still struggle with it sometimes. But that's what my brand is. That's what my TV show is. That's what people know me as on the podcast. So it's the more you can be seen and be authentic and real, honestly, that's what people want. They want the vulnerability. They want the authenticity. And that's what's going to drive your numbers. That's what's going to drive your
that engagement. It's going to happen because they know a real person's there. I love that. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now you mentioned that you're starting to think sponsors. And so the last of the 5 things that we look for the best ways to is thinking about monetizing your show. So it's a little bit early because you're just thinking about that. But what do you believe? Because you said earlier when we were discussing that you thought sponsors wasn't an option for you or wasn't in your thinking. But you are switching that now.
Well, I am, because of, especially for the I Am Enough TV, because of the scope of reach that we have. And yes, sponsorship. It's not that I never thought it was for me. It was just, I always have a hard time asking for money, which is funny because now I have a nonprofit.
You have a nonprofit. Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're going to have to get over that.
Which is what I've been working on, which is why now sponsorship is kind of something more that I'm looking at. Because we do, and I think we waited for a while because we wanted to get numbers up and things like that as well. But sponsorship is a way to go. I mean, it helps offset different costs of having your show. Plus, my biggest thing is giving back, right? And so I want to be able to give back to companies that believe in our message of our podcast and of the TV show. I'm not going to just have someone as a sponsor that really has nothing to do with my show. I know a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Relevant sponsors. Yes. I like that idea.
I want to make sure there's I'm not going to do a cat food, and have a sponsor for cat food. I don't like cats. I'm definitely allergic to cats, right? So I'm not going to have.
It's not authentic to you. You won't be posting pictures of you and cute cats on Instagram anytime soon.
Even if they send me a lot of money, I'm not going to do it. That's me staying in integrity. And so, so relevancy, but also it opens up the door to even more networking, right? Because if you partner with a sponsor and then they're also, doing your, sharing your podcast and things like that. And it could be a huge corporate sponsor. I mean, you're talking about not just the money, but just the audience reach. So yes, we're slowly jumping into it, but I've got, I'm looking for sponsors for the TV show, for the nonprofit, for the podcast. So it's a little bit overwhelming.
And I think that, that's really hard today for a lot of nonprofits, because we were just having this debate and discussion last night in one of our groups that, is this a really good time to be asked someone needed to plan a gala figure out how to plan a virtual gala because they needed to fundraise for, I think it was a temple or something like that, or a church or something. And I was like, I don't know that it's the best time to be asking for money from anyone. However, there is this model of, there are a lot of brands out there. There are a lot of sponsors out there who now can no longer use their ad budget in the way that they were using it before.
That's a good
And
thought.
they now need to rethink about how they can reach those same people. So as long as you start to understand enough about your listeners, right? And you've got women from this age to that age, and this is what they're like, and this is what we now know about them. It's a lot easier for you then to have those conversations with the sponsors and your obvious commitment to them by producing week after week and consistent content and service. Well, who doesn't want to be associated with that as long as it's relevant and in line with your integrity?
That is a very good point, because it's funny. We're about ready to launch a very new big project through the nonprofit, and I cannot wait. But it's a huge undertaking. But I can't say anything because we don't want to start the fundraising and the donation piece until all of this is done. But now, because I'm just sitting here like, oh my gosh, I want to tell everyone about it. But I can't. But that's a really good thing to think about. Yes, because
because there are people out there who are just saying their companies are fine, they're doing well, they're going to. I mean, it's not like they're going to disappear tomorrow, and yet, but they don't have the advertising options they had when events were happening, or people were out in the field, people were out in stores, people were out and about, right? So that's where you can find some alignment of need.
Yep.
And on both sides, and great collaboration. So I look forward to seeing what you do next with all of that. So a couple of little things, tips for people, and I'd love you if you would give it both from TV and podcast perspective, because I think this is really the case. So someone's out there sitting on the fence about this and they haven't started their show yet. What's your advice to them?
Do it. Because honestly, this is what happens in life. We have that nudging feeling to do something, and the fear keeps us stuck. Mm-hmm. And if you do it and it bombs, oh, well, you didn't lose anything, right? Lesson learned. Yeah. But it's probably not going to bomb as long as you're honest and authentic and real and vulnerable and all of this stuff. Have fun with it, right? So that is the thing, is just do it. We had no idea. Literally, if you guys go back to our first couple episodes on the Blonde Bombshell podcast, it was hilarious. And we had no idea what we were doing, but we loved it. We loved interviewing people. And there's no right or wrong of how long your podcast has to be. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. Just do it. If it's something you want to do, do it.
Oh, thank you so much, Megan. I absolutely love what you're doing out there. I Am Enough TV, the Blonde Bombshell podcast. They're all available on every player and every machine out there. So go ahead and take a listen, take a watch at it. This is a woman, Megan Fenyoe, is living and breathing her brand, I Am Enough. And I am so glad we got to meet each other. And I'm so glad you came on to give everybody some tips today. So I really appreciate that, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
So everyone out there, if you're listening to this right now, you could be on this show too. If you're already a podcaster, if you're already a TV caster like Megan, you could come on my show and we could talk about your binge factor on the air. So minimum requirement is you had to have 25 episodes of whatever it is that you produce, and we'd love to talk to you. So you can apply for that on thebingefactor.com. I also want to remind you that I would love your suggestions. So if you're a listener and you're still sitting on the fence and you haven't started your show, suggest one of your favorite hosts to me. I would love to hear from you about that. So as always, I am happy to keep the podcast movement going, keep the video cast movement going in whatever way that I can. So if I can help you, you know where to find me, thebingefactor.com, and you know where to find everything about Megan Fenyoe and everything about I Am Enough TV, and the Blonde Bombshell will be in the blog post for this episode at the Binge Factor at thebingefactor.com. Can't talk today. And everyone, I'll be back next time with another great episode. Look forward to talking with you then.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.